It was supposed to be the safest neighborhood in Ohio, a place where garage doors open in sync every morning. Sprinklers whisper across trim lawns, and mailboxes gleamed under the suburban sun. But on the morning of June 9th, 2019, a jogger stumbled upon something that would shatter the illusion forever. The body of Marianne Cole, the president of the Willowbend Estates Homeowners Association, lying face down near the community pond, her manicured nails caked with mud, her white cardigan soaked in blood. By noon, the news had spread through every cul-de-sac like wildfire. The perfect suburb had a body, and beneath its tidy hedges, manicured lawns, and HOA bylaws, something dark had been festering for years. Willowbend Estates wasn't a place people just lived. It was a place they performed. Located 30 miles outside Columbus, it was a kind of gated community that made real estate agents beam with pride. Rows of identical two-story homes with beige siding, matching shutters, and circular driveways. A man-made pond with paddle boats. A clubhouse for meetings and family events. And, most importantly, an HOA board that enforced order with religious zeal. Residents joked that living in Willowbend meant signing your soul to the bylaws. Trash bins had to be rolled out only between 6 and 7 a.m. Grass could never exceed 2 inches. Mailboxes had to match, black metal, regulation approved. Even Halloween decorations were limited to family-appropriate themes. And at the top of this pyramid of perfection sat Marianne Cole. She was 58, impeccably dressed, always wearing pearls and pastel sweaters, and had a voice that could slice through any room. Under her rule, Willowbend ran like a machine. No detail escaped her. Not a dying rose bush, not a faded driveway, not even a teenage party that ran past 10. To her supporters, Marianne was the reason property values soared. To her enemies, and there were many, she was a tyrant in heels. Marianne had moved to Willowbend 12 years earlier with her husband, Douglas, a retired architect. They were childless, disciplined, and lived for order. Her calendar was color-coded, her kitchen immaculate. Her neighbors said she ran the HOA like a Fortune 500 company, efficient, cold, precise. She cared about image more than anything, said Kathy Griggs, her next-door neighbor, during a later interview. If your flower beds looked bad, she'd call you out in front of everyone. But if you got an award from the county, she'd take credit for it. Marianne's reign had been unchallenged until the months leading up to her death. In April, during an HOA meeting at the clubhouse, she'd introduce a new set of restrictions, stricter ones. No satellite dishes visible from the street. No cars parked on driveways overnight. No unsanctioned yard sales. Several homeowners pushed back, including Daniel and Emily Hart, a young couple who'd recently moved in from Cleveland. They claimed the HOA fees were being mismanaged and demanded transparency. Marianne shut them down with her signature smile. If you don't like the rules, she told them sweetly, you're welcome to move. That was the beginning of the fracture. The morning of June 9th began like any other in Willowbend. Birds chirped. Sprinklers hissed. Lawn crews hummed down Maple Circle. At 6:42 a.m., Alicia Romero, a 31-year-old teacher who lived on Sycamore Lane, set out for her morning jog around the pond. The mist still clung to the grass. The sun was barely up, and then, halfway through her route, she saw it. What she first thought was a bag of clothes tangled in reeds. But when she got closer, she saw hair. A woman's body, face down, one arm bent awkwardly beneath her, the other reaching toward the water. A string of pearls had snapped and scattered in the mud. The back of her white sweater was stained deep red. Alicia froze. Then she screamed. By the time Officer Ryan Mercer from the local precinct arrived, the scene was eerily quiet. Birds still sang, oblivious. A maintenance worker had stopped his mower, standing pale and shaking. Marianne Cole, Willowbend's Iron Queen, was dead. The local police department wasn't used to homicides, especially not in gated communities where the most frequent call was about noise complaints or teenagers fishing in the pond after dark. But Chief Elena Ruiz took no chances. She sealed off the area, called in detectives from the county, and began interviewing residents immediately. The first assumption was a mugging gone wrong, but that theory collapsed almost instantly. Marianne's diamond ring was still on her finger. Her phone, placed neatly in her jacket pocket, hadn't been taken. Her pearl necklace was broken, yes, but none of the beads were missing. The mud near her body showed a single set of footprints besides hers, small, narrow, likely female. And on her left palm, there was something else, a torn scrap of paper, smeared but legible. It read, "We're done playing by your rules." The detective soon realized that in Willowbend, nearly everyone had a reason to hate Marianne Cole. One Daniel and Emily Hart, the young couple who challenged her at the HOA meeting. They received multiple fines in the weeks before her death. One for parking a trailer in the driveway, another for improper holiday decor. Neighbors reported heated arguments. Emily had allegedly shouted at Marianne during a community barbecue, calling her a dictator with a clipboard. When questioned, Daniel was defensive. "She humiliated us," he said. "She made living here hell. But we didn't kill her." His wife, Emily, refused to speak without a lawyer. 2. Douglas Cole, the husband. Douglas seemed genuinely distraught, or perhaps detectives noted, carefully composed. He claimed Marianne had gone out for her morning walk around 6 a.m. and never returned. But neighbors reported the couple had been arguing the previous night, loudly enough for people 2 houses away to hear. One neighbor, Walt Henderson, later told police, "She kept yelling about money, something about an account." Then he shouted, "You're not as clean as you pretend to be." And that's when I heard something break. 3. Carla Donnelly, the treasurer, a friend turned foe. Carla was the HOA treasurer who'd recently resigned under mysterious circumstances. She'd accused Marianne of falsifying invoices for landscape improvements that never happened. When the board ignored her, she quit and filed a complaint with the county's auditor. When detectives visited her home, Carla's eyes were red and swollen. "Do I regret fighting her?" she said. "No, but I didn't want her dead. She wanted power, not justice. I just wanted the truth." 4. The landscaper. Miguel Torres Miguel had maintained the neighborhood's lawns for 6 years. Residents adored him. Everyone except Marianne, who'd threatened to replace him over poor pruning standards. He was seen arguing with her near the clubhouse 2 days before the murder. When asked where he was that morning, Miguel said he'd been mowing a property 2 streets away. His alibi checked out, but his truck's dashboard camera, when reviewed later, revealed he'd driven past the pond at 6:30 a.m., exactly 12 minutes before the body was found. The coroner's report revealed a chilling detail. Marianne hadn't been shot or stabbed. She'd been strangled, the bruising on her neck consistent with hands, not a cord. The estimated time of death, between 6 o'clock and 6:15 a.m. There was also dirt under her fingernails and fibers from a gray knit sweater, the same kind worn by Emily Hart in multiple Facebook photos. When police asked Emily about it, she scoffed. "I own 100 sweaters. Everyone here wears gray. What does that prove?" Still, she couldn't explain why her smartwatch registered her leaving the house at 6:03 a.m. and returning at 6:29 a.m., right in the murder window. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered that beneath Willowbend's surface of perfection was a web of resentment, secrets, and financial deceit. Marianne had been running the HOA with absolute control, including the finances. But when investigators subpoenaed bank records, they found $87,000 missing from the community fund over 3 years. The withdrawals were masked as maintenance contracts to non-existent vendors. The trail led to an off-the-books account under the name WB Maintenance LLC, with Marianne as the sole signatory. Her husband claimed ignorance. But detectives discovered Douglas had made several large cash deposits into their joint account shortly afterward. When confronted, he said she said it was a reimbursement. "I didn't ask questions." But someone had asked questions, Carla Donnelly. And just 2 weeks before her death, Marianne had reportedly told a neighbor, "Carla's going to ruin everything if she doesn't back off." By the second week, the media had turned Willowbend into a circus. Satellite vans lined the streets. Reporters camped by the gates. Headlines screamed, "Murder in the suburbs. HOA queen found dead in pond." Residents began locking their doors for the first time. HOA meetings were suspended, and rumors multiplied like weeds. Some claimed Marianne had been targeted by an outsider, maybe a disgruntled contractor. Others whispered that the HOA funds were tied to something bigger, perhaps real estate fraud. Then came a chilling revelation. The security cameras at the main gate had been tampered with the night before the murder. Someone had cut the power briefly around 11:47 p.m. When restored, the footage between 11:45 p.m. and 6:20 a.m. was missing. Whoever killed Marianne had known exactly when to strike. Chief Elena Ruiz was methodical, skeptical, and experienced enough to know that murders like this were rarely random. She re-examined the pond area, this time focusing on where Marianne's body was found. She realized something strange. The body was discovered near the north edge, but Marianne's home was south, meaning she would have had to take the long route, through a wooded trail residents rarely use in the mornings. Why go that way? A drone scan of the area revealed faint tire tracks on the trail, leading to a small maintenance gate behind the pond, one usually locked. But the padlock had been cut. Ruiz ordered a sweep. Under a bush near the gate, officers found a torn fabric fragment, gray knit, matching the fiber found under Marianne's nails. And then inside the pond's mud, divers found something else, a small silver key. It didn't fit Marianne's house or car or the HOA office. But 2 days later, they found what it did unlock, a storage unit registered under the name Douglas Cole. When police opened the metal door, they expected tools, maybe household junk. Instead, they found boxes of HOA documents, envelopes filled with cash, and a folder labeled WB Maintenance. Inside the folder, copies of checks written to contractors who didn't exist. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. In a separate box were photographs, dozens of them, showing residents violating HOA rules. A woman leaving her trash out early. A man repainting his fence the wrong shade. A couple hosting an unapproved gathering. Every image had notes scribbled in Marianne's handwriting. Repeat violator. Fine again. Warn next meeting. Possible eviction. It was surveillance, an obsession with control that had consumed her. But among the photos, there was one that made Ruiz stop cold. A picture of Emily Hart, taken at night, standing by her car. The words beneath it. She'll regret this. Douglas Cole was brought in for questioning again. His hands trembled. He looked exhausted. Detective Ruiz laid out the evidence. The fake company, the missing money, the photos. Were you helping your wife blackmail your neighbors? She asked. Douglas hesitated. She said it was for order, he murmured. People don't follow rules unless they're afraid. She wanted control, not money. Then why hide the cash? He looked down. Because she didn't trust the bank. Or me. Then, after a pause, she said someone was watching her, that they'd found out. Ruiz leaned forward. Who? Douglas swallowed hard. She never said, but she was scared. 3 weeks after the murder, as the case seemed to stall, Detective Ruiz received a plain envelope addressed simply to the one who still cares. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, "You're looking in the wrong direction. The real reason she died is buried under Lot 43. Check the blueprints." Lot 43 was a vacant property near the back of Willowbend, a patch of grass awaiting development. When police checked the HOA archives, they found that Lot 43 had been officially marked unsuitable for construction due to drainage issues. But the blueprints inside the storage unit told another story. Marianne had ordered a landscape renovation for that same lot 6 months earlier, paid through WB Maintenance LLC. Detectives brought in ground-penetrating radar. What they found made every officer's blood run cold. Beneath the soil, 6 feet down, was a sealed metal barrel. Inside, a man's remains. The remains were skeletal, but preserved enough to identify the victim through dental records. Thomas Keegan, a contractor who'd gone missing in 2017 after allegedly embezzling money from a construction project in, where else, Willowbend Estates. His disappearance had been written off as a runaway case. But the record showed that he had been working for Marianne Cole at the time, specifically on a drainage improvement for Lot 43. Now he was in the ground. The discovery changed everything. The murder of Marianne Cole was no longer just a crime of passion. It was the unraveling of something far darker. If she'd known about the body, someone had silenced her before she could talk. By mid-July, the perfect facade of Willowbend was in ruins. Residents whispered of the curse of the HOA. Property values plunged. The gates were left open. The community no longer felt safe. Detective Ruiz pieced together a chilling theory. Marianne had discovered that the 2017 drainage project was a front for embezzlement, perhaps involving her husband or other HOA members. But instead of going to police, she'd help bury it, literally. When Carla started asking questions, Marianne panicked. Then, in 2019, someone decided Marianne was a liability. But who? Douglas had motive, to protect himself. Emily Hart had rage and opportunity. Carla had guilt and secrets of her own. And yet none of them matched the final clue Ruiz received. After weeks of reviewing footage from nearby security systems, an analyst found something remarkable. A motion-activated wildlife camera placed by a teenager behind the pond for a school project. The footage from June 9th, time-stamped 6:11 a.m., showed two figures near the water. One was clearly Marianne Cole, her pastel sweater visible even through fog. The other was shorter, wearing a gray sweater and dark pants. They argued. Marianne pointed toward the water, shouting something indistinct. The other person lunged, and Marianne stumbled backward. The camera's view cut off for 6 seconds. When it resumed, the smaller figure knelt over her, motionless, then stood, brushed their hands, and walked toward the wooded trail. Detective Ruiz paused the video. The person turned briefly toward the lens. It was a woman, but not Emily Hart. It was Carla Donnelly. When confronted with the footage, Carla didn't deny it. Her hands trembled as Ruiz slid the still frame across the table. She found out, Carla whispered, about Thomas Keegan, about the barrel. I told her we had to go to the police, but she said she'd handle it the Willowbend way. That meant burying it again, with me as her scapegoat. Tears welled in her eyes. I went to meet her that morning to make her tell the truth. She laughed in my face, said no one would believe me. That's when I pushed her. I didn't mean to. She fell. And then she covered her mouth. It happened too fast. But Ruiz wasn't convinced. The strangulation marks weren't consistent with a single push. And there was something else in Carla's story that didn't fit. She claimed she hadn't known about the missing money until after Marianne's death. Yet the stolen funds were first reported by her own resignation letter. Carla was lying about something. And then Douglas Cole came forward with one final, damning revelation. After Carla's arrest, Douglas requested to speak privately with Detective Ruiz. His hand shook as he handed her a flash drive. She thought I didn't know, he said softly. But I did. Marianne wasn't the only one keeping secrets. The drive contained audio files, recordings from a small digital recorder Marianne had used during HOA meetings. But one recording was different. It was made the night before her death. In it, Marianne's voice trembled. They know about Lot 43. I can't protect everyone anymore. If they come for me, tell the truth, or you'll be next. A pause. Then a second voice, calm, male, deliberate. You should have stopped digging, Marianne. Detective Ruiz froze. She knew that voice. It wasn't Douglas. It wasn't Miguel. It wasn't any resident. It belonged to an attorney who'd handled the HOA's filings for years. Robert Lang, a man no one had suspected. Within hours, the investigation expanded. Financial records tied Robert Lang to shell companies connected to WB Maintenance, and possibly to Thomas Keegan's death 2 years prior. But before police could bring him in for questioning, Lang's car was found abandoned at a rest stop off Interstate 71. The driver's seat was empty, the door ajar. Inside was a single envelope addressed to Detective Ruiz. The letter read, "Some things were meant to stay buried, Detective. Marianne forgot that. Don't make the same mistake." And taped to the bottom of the letter, a key identical to the one found near the pond. Detective Ruiz stared at it, realization dawning. There was another storage unit, and whatever was inside it was about to expose just how deep the rot went inside the perfect suburb. The discovery of Marianne Cole's body had shattered Willowbend Estates' perfect image. But by the end of that first summer, the illusion of order had completely disintegrated. The HOA's queen was dead. The treasure was behind bars. A body had been unearthed from beneath Lot 43. And somewhere out there, a man who knew far too much, attorney Robert Lang, had vanished, leaving behind a warning and a single silver key. Detective Elena Ruiz stood in her office the next morning, staring at that key under the fluorescent light. The teeth were jagged, one edge slightly bent, a faint number etched into the side. U-217. Whatever it opened, Marianne Cole had died trying to keep it hidden. And Robert Lang was willing to kill to keep it that way. The key matched the facility 20 miles north of Willowbend. Eversafe Storage, a quiet, unremarkable row of corrugated metal units flanked by chain-link fencing and cameras that hadn't worked in months. Detective Ruiz arrived at dawn with 2 deputies and a warrant. The air was thick with the scent of rain and oil. When she slid the key into the padlock of Unit 217, her pulse quickened. The metal door rattled open with a groan. Inside was darkness and dust, rows of boxes, an old filing cabinet, a folding table. No body, no blood, just silence. But then, under the hum of a flickering bulb, she saw it. A cardboard box labeled Archive, 2009. Inside were manila folders, all stamped with the Willowbend Estates HOA letterhead. They were meeting minutes, correspondence logs, violation reports. But buried beneath them was a plain envelope marked confidential. Legal retainer agreement. The signatures at the bottom chilled her, Marianne Cole and Robert Lang. Underneath, a clause authorizing Lang to manage all discretionary accounts, subcontracts, and compliance documentation. In other words, Marianne hadn't been embezzling alone. She'd had help. And somewhere between them, the balance of power had shifted until someone decided one of them had to die. By mid-July, a countywide manhunt for Robert Lang was underway. His firm in Columbus claimed he'd taken a leave of absence. His condo was spotless, computer wiped clean, phone deactivated. Detective Ruiz obtained one lucky lead from a gas station near the I-71 rest stop. Surveillance footage showing Lang the night before his car was found. He was calm, carrying a single duffel bag, buying coffee and cigarettes. He looked directly into the camera before leaving, almost as if he wanted to be seen. "Where the hell are you, Lang?" Ruiz muttered as she watched the footage again and again. The trail went cold for weeks, until a tip came in from a retired postal worker named Leon Chalmers. He'd recognized Lang's photo from the news. That man rented a P.O. box under fake name R. Leonard. Been getting thick envelopes from a place called Willow Creek, holding for years. Ruiz's eyes narrowed. Willow Creek Holdings. The same shell company tied to the fake HOA vendor, WB Maintenance LLC. Lang wasn't just hiding the HOA's money. He'd built an entire empire on it. Meanwhile, Carla Donnelly, the former treasurer charged with Marianne's murder, sat in county jail awaiting trial. The prosecution had the video evidence, her near the scene, but something about her confession still bothered Ruiz. So she visited her again. Carla looked smaller now, drained. "I already told you," she said quietly. "It was an accident." Ruiz leaned forward. "You said Marianne was blackmailing you, that she wanted to bury what happened with Thomas Keegan. But you didn't mention Lang. Why?" Carla blinked. "Lang? He's just a lawyer. Marianne handled everything. I barely spoke to him." Ruiz slid the retainer agreement across the table. "Then explain this." Carla's face went pale. She said it was legal paperwork, just for record keeping. "Did you know there were multiple accounts in his name?" Carla hesitated. "No, but Marianne kept saying the HOA was part of something bigger, a network. She said we were protected." "Protected by who?" Carla whispered. She called him the Foundation. I thought she was bluffing. Ruiz spent the next week digging through property records, tracing every transaction linked to Willowbend Estates. It was like peeling an onion, each layer more rotten than the last. Dozens of suburban communities across Ohio shared the same management firm, Willow Creek Holdings, owned by an anonymous trust headquartered in Delaware. The company funneled HOA fees from residents into maintenance accounts that never matched actual invoices. Millions of dollars had disappeared. Lang's signature appeared on nearly all of them. And in several cases, when residents complained about missing funds or unsafe construction, the HOA president mysteriously resigned. Or, in one instance, disappeared entirely. It wasn't just about greed anymore. This was organized corruption, and possibly something darker. When Ruiz presented her findings to the county prosecutor, his tone turned cautious. "Be careful with this, Elena," he said. "You're poking at people who can buy judges." Ruiz's jaw tightened. "Then I'll find the ones they can't buy." By late August, the Willowbend community was a ghost town. Lawns overgrown, for sale signs multiplying, property values collapsing. But one night, a call came through dispatch. Trespassers spotted inside the abandoned HOA clubhouse. Ruiz responded personally. Inside, the air was stale with mildew and dust. Faint flashlight beams flickered from the meeting room. Ruiz drew her gun, moving quietly. Then she heard voices, hushed, tense. "Can't let them find the rest of it." They already did. Lot 43 was just one. What about 51? The voices froze when Ruiz's flashlight hit their faces. Two men, both in dark maintenance uniforms with Willow Creek Holdings logos. One bolted. The other froze, hands up. Ruiz tackled a fleeing man outside near the parking lot. He struggled, then shouted something that chilled her. She shouldn't have dug there. It was never supposed to come out. Inside their van, Ruiz found blueprints. Not just for Willowbend, but for 7 other suburban communities, all marked with red circles on specific lots. Each circle had a handwritten note. "Do not excavate." One of them was labeled WB Lot 51. When Ruiz compared them to public records, her stomach turned. Every marked lot had been part of a landscape improvement or drainage project between 2015 and 2018, the same years the embezzlement occurred. It wasn't a coincidence. These lots were burial sites or drop points. Marianne's murder had blown open a criminal network hiding beneath America's cleanest cul-de-sacs. 2 weeks later, on September 10th, excavation began at Lot 51, a grassy corner near the playground. Within hours, workers hit metal. Inside another sealed drum were human remains, a woman this time, estimated to have died around 2016. Dental records later identified her as Susan Fielder, a former HOA president of a neighboring community who had resigned under mysterious circumstances 3 years earlier. The pattern was unmistakable now. HOA presidents were being silenced and replaced when they learned too much. And Marianne Cole had been the latest in a long line. Lang's finances revealed deposits from offshore accounts tied to property developers with shady reputations. Companies that profited from foreclosed or bankrupt HOA communities. The scheme was elegant and cruel. Establish tight HOA control. Funnel resident dues into shell accounts. Drive out dissenters through fines, lawsuits, or worse. Collapse the neighborhood and sell the land cheap to partner developers. It was suburban cannibalism, the rich devouring the middle class, one HOA at a time. Ruiz was about to expose it, until the threats began. Anonymous texts, a dead crow left on her porch, her dog poisoned, and one night, while reviewing files in her office, the phone rang from an unlisted number. "You're doing good work, detective," a male voice said, "but stop digging." Marianne didn't listen either. Then silence. Determined not to back down, Ruiz returned to the ever-safe unit. She noticed something she'd missed before, a small black lens tucked under a shelf. A hidden camera. She sent it to forensics. The footage covered 3 months prior to Marianne's death. Most of it showed Lang visiting periodically, dropping off boxes. But on one night, June 2nd, Marianne herself appeared. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder. She opened a box, removed a stack of files, and placed them into a new folder labeled Foundations List. She stared at the camera, almost deliberately, and whispered, "If anything happens to me, the list is for Elena Ruiz. She'll understand." Then she left. But that folder, the Foundations List, wasn't anywhere in the unit when Ruiz searched it. Someone had taken it after Marianne's death, and only one person knew it existed, Robert Lang. It was early October when a call came from a small motel outside Cincinnati. A guest had checked in using the name R. Leonard. The clerk recognized him from a news segment. By the time Ruiz arrived, the motel was quiet. Too quiet. Room 12's door was ajar. Inside, the bed was made, the TV still on. Lang sat in the corner, pale, trembling. "I knew you'd find me," he said softly. "She wanted you to." Ruiz stepped closer. "Where's the list, Robert?" He smiled faintly. "Not here. Somewhere safe." Marianne thought she could expose them, but she underestimated how deep this goes. "Who's them?" He looked up. "You think this is just about HOA money? The foundation owns banks, courts, real estate boards. They build suburbs to launder power. Every HOA president who learned the truth was erased." Ruiz's pulse quickened. "Then why are you still alive?" Lang's eyes darted to the door. "Because I made copies." A single shot rang out before Ruiz could react. The window shattered. Lang slumped forward, a red bloom spreading across his shirt. Outside, the shooter was gone. But in Lang's hand was a folded piece of paper, blood-stained but legible. On it, a list of 7 names. Each name corresponded to a person connected to an HOA across Ohio. 3 were marked deceased. 2 were missing. 1 was unknown. And the 7th, Ruiz E. Her breath caught. Her own name was on the list. Someone, somewhere, had already decided she was next. A week later, Ruiz received another anonymous envelope, postmarked from Cleveland. Inside was a USB drive labeled for her eyes only. The video began with static, then cut to surveillance footage from a boardroom, polished with table, panoramic windows. Seated around it were 7 people, their faces partially obscured. At the head of the table, Patricia Whitmore, president of Willow Creek Holdings. Ruiz recognized her immediately, a name that had appeared on several of Lang's bank transfers. Patricia's voice was cool and confident. Marianne was sloppy. Lang was emotional. "We can't afford more leaks. Clean the files and move assets to Phase 3. The foundation must stay invisible." Another voice, male, responded. "And the detective?" Patricia smiled faintly. "We'll handle her like the others." The video cut off. Ruiz leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. This wasn't a murder case anymore. It was a war, and she was on the front line. Knowing she was being watched, Ruiz played her next move carefully. She arranged a fake press briefing at the county courthouse, claiming she would reveal major evidence in the HOA case. Within 24 hours, she noticed a black sedan following her home. She let it happen. That night, when the sedan parked outside her house, Ruiz stepped out, wearing a wire, her gun holstered. 2 men emerged. "Detective Ruiz?" one asked smoothly. "We'd like to discuss a settlement. You're interfering with—" She interrupted, her voice calm but sharp. "Funny, I thought the foundation preferred silence to settlements." The men froze. The audio transmitted straight to a nearby surveillance van. Officers swarmed. Both men were arrested. One turned out to be a private security contractor employed by Willow Creek Holdings. Under interrogation, he cracked. "There's a meeting," he said. "Tomorrow night. Whitmore's estate. They're moving the files out of state." The next evening, a joint task force raided Patricia Whitmore's mansion on Lake Erie. Inside, they found hard drives, encrypted ledgers, and correspondence implicating high-level officials in a multi-million-dollar real estate laundering ring. But Patricia herself was gone. Her security footage showed her leaving 2 hours earlier, escorted by a man in a charcoal suit. When Ruiz zoomed in, she recognized him instantly. Edward Sloan, Lang's former business partner, and the man who'd signed Marianne Cole's earliest HOA contracts years ago. In the aftermath of the raid, Ruiz's department was pressured from all sides. Political calls, mysterious funding withdrawals, bureaucratic delays. But Ruiz refused to let it die. She kept one photograph from Lang's motel room, a faded picture of Marianne standing in front of a row of suburban homes, holding a binder labeled HOA Compliance, the Foundation. At the bottom, scrawled in ink, "The truth is buried where the rules began." Ruiz finally understood. The foundation hadn't started with Willowbend. It had roots stretching back decades, perhaps to the very first planned community Lang ever managed. The missing files weren't just financial records. They were the origin of the network, proof of how suburban America became the perfect cover for organized crime. And one of those communities still existed, under a new name. In November, Ruiz drove to the edge of Franklin County, where a newly built development stood. Pristine homes, identical lawns, a bright white sign that read, "Welcome to Willow Creek Estates, a foundation community." It was almost poetic. The foundation hadn't been hiding. It was still expanding. She parked across from the sales office. Through the window, she saw Patricia Whitmore talking to a realtor, smiling as if nothing had happened. Ruiz clenched her fists. She had no warrant, no backup, no time. But she knew one thing. She couldn't walk away now. She started the engine, but then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop. They already know you're here." Her rear-view mirror caught the glint of headlights. A dark SUV had pulled in behind her. Then another, and another. Within seconds, 3 black vehicles boxed her in. Ruiz reached for a radio. Static. Her phone buzzed again. "You should have listened." The SUV doors opened. Men in suits stepped out, moving toward her car. Ruiz gripped her sidearm, breath shallow, pulse racing. She wasn't ready to die. Not yet. But as the first man approached, she saw something strange. A silver pin on his lapel, shaped like a key. The same key Lang had left behind. And then everything went black. When Detective Ruiz awoke, she was no longer in her car. The walls were concrete. The air cold and damp. A single light flickered above. On a metal table in front of her lay a binder, the foundation's list. A voice echoed from the shadows. "You wanted the truth, Detective. Now you'll learn how we built it." Detective Elena Ruiz stood inside the dim storage unit, the single fluorescent bulb flickering overhead. The air was cold, metallic. Dust hung like fog. In front of her, a rusted steel cabinet sealed with a coated padlock. The same kind of cabinet that appeared in HOA maintenance records a decade ago. The key Robert Lang left behind fit the lock perfectly. Ruiz's pulse pounded as she turned it. The cabinet door creaked open. Inside were 3 banker boxes, each labeled with fading stickers. WB Maintenance. Financials 2013 to 2016. Homeowner complaints, confidential. Property photos. And tucked at the bottom, a red binder marked Auditor Reports. Ruiz flipped it open and froze. On the first page was a signature she dreaded seeing again. Edward Sloan, the man the HOA residents once called the Auditor, a consultant who appeared in dozens of HOA board transitions across the Midwest, and vanished each time controversy or death followed. And in every file there was his recommendation to maintain order and community trust. Problem homeowners must be neutralized. Neutralized. Ruiz's mind spun to the past 2 years. The missing financial officer, the man found dead in the pond, the quiet buyouts of dissenting homeowners. It wasn't random corruption. It was systematic cleansing, disguised as community management. Every file had initials beside handled PHW, Patricia Whitmore, HOA President, RL, Robert Lang, Attorney, NDS, Edward Sloan. The binder didn't just reveal their crimes. It mapped a network, dozens of HOAs across the state linked by one consulting firm, Homestead Integrity Solutions, a shell company, fronted by Sloan, the same man who had visited Maple Crest Estates for a single week in 2016, introducing financial restructuring plans. Ruiz whispered to herself. He never left the suburbs. He moved through them. And that's when she found a final envelope in the binder, marked Personal, Marianne Keegan. Inside were photographs. Marianne, at her kitchen table, speaking to a man whose face was just out of frame. Another photo showed a hand passing her a thick file. The last one, Marianne walking out to her mailbox the night she died. Behind her in the photo was a white SUV parked at the curb. License plate 7KX 2214. Ruiz's stomach dropped. That plate belonged to Sloan's vehicle. The next morning, the county task force raided the Homestead Integrity Solutions office in Columbus. Empty, computers wiped, shredded papers filled the bins. But in the conference room, taped to whiteboard, was a printed phrase. Perfection demands sacrifice. Ruiz gathered her team, Officer Derek Sanders, Analyst Rachel Nguyen, and Captain Harlan Briggs. Sanders looked pale. "This guy's been in every HOA within 50 miles, he muttered. They all had the same audit reports, same consultant recommendations. It's like he was grooming communities. Rachel spoke softly. He made neighborhoods believe they were better off without troublemakers. They enforced it for him. Ruiz nodded. That was the brilliance and horror of it. Sloan didn't kill everyone himself. He manipulated people with policy, not weapons. He made neighbors turn against each other in the name of order. And Marianne Keegan? She had begun to uncover it. That's why she died. 2 weeks later, Robert Lang was found hiding in a motel off Route 23. He didn't resist arrest. In interrogation, Ruiz slid the red binder toward him. Lang stared at it, his hands trembling. He made me think it was about efficiency, he whispered. We were fixing the system. Cleaning up fraud, unpaid dues, noise complaints. I didn't know it meant burying people. Burying them? Ruiz pressed. Lang's eyes filled with tears. Marianne called me that night. She said she was going public, that she found Sloan's offshore accounts tied to HOA. I called him to warn him. He swallowed hard. An hour later, she was dead. Months passed. The case unraveled across the state. Dozens of HOAs were shut down, board members charged. Patricia Whitmore, the former HOA president, fled her home and was captured in Georgia using a false identity. The media called it the HOA murder network. Talk shows debated how ordinary suburbanites could be manipulated into crime. But one person remained missing, Edward Sloan. Until Ruiz received a package one morning, unmarked, no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a typed note. You're looking in the wrong direction. I didn't build the system. I just used it. Look above the HOA, not beneath it. The USB contained surveillance footage from a private country club, dated 2 weeks before Marianne's death. It showed Sloan sitting across from Richard Whitmore, Patricia's husband, and an unknown older man in a gray suit. The metadata revealed the video was taken by a security contractor employed by the County Development Board. Ruiz leaned back in her chair. If this was true, Sloan wasn't the top. He was a tool. The real architect was someone inside county governance, someone who could approve zoning changes, property seizures, and HOA charters. Someone who could make bodies and paper trails disappear. One night, Ruiz sat alone reviewing files. The office was silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Something in the original police photos from Marianne's home caught her eye. A faint watermark on one of the documents scattered on the floor. She enhanced it digitally. MC County Rezoning Authority, private copy. The missing link, the perfect suburb, was never just an HOA experiment. It was a test site for urban acquisition and laundering, using homeowners associations as fronts for corrupt land deals. Sloan had orchestrated the cleanup when residents like Marianne started asking questions. The Whitmores enforced it locally. Lang kept it legal. But the Rezoning Authority approved it all. Ruiz arranged a meeting with Commissioner Dalton Briggs, brother of Captain Harlan Briggs, her superior, the same man whose signature appeared on half the rezoning documents. Dalton smiled coldly as she entered his office. You've been busy, he said, chasing ghosts in cul-de-sacs. Ruiz set the binder on his desk. You signed off on Maple Crest Estates. You approved the land transfers. And you met with Sloan. He leaned back. Do you think you can dismantle a machine that's been running for decades? I don't have to, Ruiz said quietly. I just have to turn the light on. That's when the doors opened. Sanders and 2 federal agents stepped inside with a warrant. For the first time, Dalton's smirk faltered. But as they cuffed him, he said something Ruiz would never forget. You'll never stop it, because everyone loves the illusion of a perfect neighborhood. Months later, Ruiz stood at Marianne's grave. The trial had concluded. Dalton Briggs and Patricia Whitmore were sentenced to life. Lang received 15 years for conspiracy and obstruction. Edward Sloan, still missing, was believed dead, though no body was ever found. Ruiz placed a single white rose on the grave. "Your fight wasn't for nothing," she whispered. The suburbs changed after that. State legislation dissolved hundreds of HOAs across Ohio. But new community trusts began forming under different names, safer, cleaner, more corporate. And somewhere in another quiet neighborhood, a new HOA was forming, one that promised integrity, stability, harmony, the same word Sloan used. Months later, a podcast about the case titled The Perfect Suburb became a national sensation. Listeners were horrified by how ordinary people had turned into accomplices. Neighbors signing papers, ignoring cries for help, enforcing silence in exchange for peace. Detective Ruiz spoke in the final episode. Evil doesn't always wear a mask or carry a weapon. Sometimes it wears a name tag, attends board meetings, and smiles at you from across the picket fence. She paused before her last words. The suburbs promise perfection, but perfection, by design, needs someone to blame. And when the system decides who doesn't belong, who among us will have the courage to say no? 6 months later, Ruiz received one final letter, postmarked from Idaho. Inside, a typed message. "Perfection lives on, detective. Thank you for keeping the dream alive." Yes. Attached was a glossy brochure for a new development, Homestead Ridge, a model community for the modern family. And in the background of the photo, standing among smiling families, a familiar figure in a charcoal suit, pale gray eyes staring straight into the camera. Edward Sloan, still alive, still watching. Evil doesn't always come from chaos. Sometimes it hides in order. The desire for control, perfection, and silence can become the breeding ground for something far darker than crime. Compliance. If your neighborhood turned against you, in the name of keeping everything perfect, would you speak up or stay silent to keep your peace?